I am 99 years old, and I am not speaking to you from the comfort of theory or the arrogance of youth. I am speaking to you from the thin, trembling edge of a life that is almost finished. I can feel the wind of the end against my face. I can hear the quiet footsteps of time walking toward me with a patience that cannot be bribed or delayed. And before I disappear into that silence, I must turn around and call out to you, because you are still standing in the noisy room of tomorrow, laughing, planning, postponing, pretending that the music will never stop. Listen to me carefully. I have buried my husband. I have buried my closest friends. I have watched entire generations rise like morning mist and then dissolve into memory. I have also buried the woman I used to be, the one who believed she had forever, the one who kept saying, "Not yet, later, when the moment is right." That woman wasted years polishing dreams she never lived long enough to touch. And now, with nothing left to lose but my final breath, I feel an obligation to tell you the truth you keep avoiding. You are living as if time were a generous landlord who will always renew your lease. You move through your days with a comfortable illusion that the calendar is endless, that the important conversations can wait, that love can be postponed, that joy can be scheduled like a dentist appointment. But time is not a landlord. Time is a silent thief. It does not argue. It does not warn. It simply takes one ordinary morning at a time. I remember a woman named Claire. It was the summer of 1973, bright and restless with possibility. Claire was my sister, my mirror, my confidant. She had a laugh that filled entire rooms and a list of dreams she carried like folded letters in her handbag. 5 more years, she used to tell me. 5 more years of hard work, and then I'll travel. Then I'll learn to dance. Then I'll finally live the way I want. She believed in the sacred promise of later. 3 weeks after her 40th birthday, she collapsed in the middle of a crowded street, grocery bags spilling oranges and bread onto the pavement like a careless offering. A sudden aneurysm, the doctor said, instant, merciless. Claire never saw Paris. She never danced beneath foreign stars. Her life ended not with a grand farewell, but with the dull confusion of strangers stepping around her fallen body. Standing beside her coffin, I realized something that frightened me more than death itself. The tragedy was not that Claire died. The tragedy was that she had spent her entire existence preparing to begin. She treated her life like a waiting room for a future that never arrived. Her notebooks were full of plans. Her heart was full of delay. And now, when I look at the world you are building, I see Claire everywhere. I see people postponing happiness as if it were a luxury item they can only afford after decades of sacrifice. I see souls negotiating with time, making bargains that time has no intention of honoring. After Claire died, the world did not pause to mourn her unfinished dreams. The buses kept running. The market opened the next morning. People still argued about trivial things like the price of tomatoes and the outcome of football matches. I remember standing at my kitchen window watching the ordinary machinery of life continue without her, and it struck me with a strange cruelty that existence is both deeply personal and completely indifferent. You imagine your absence will echo like thunder, but most of the time it dissolves like a whisper in a crowded room. For a while, I told myself I had learned the lesson. I promised I would live more bravely, more honestly. But human beings are astonishingly skilled at forgetting what frightens them. Within months, I slipped back into the same comfortable rhythm of postponement. I worked longer hours. I told my husband we would take that seaside holiday next summer. I told my daughter I would attend her school recital if I could get away from the office. I believed, as you believe now, that responsibility must always come before joy. There is a particular arrogance in youth that disguises itself as practicality. You call it discipline. You call it planning. You say you are building a future worth living in, but what you are often building is a beautifully decorated prison made of schedules and expectations. You fill your days with obligations that feel urgent, but mean very little when viewed from the far end of a lifetime. Let me tell you about the house I once owned. It stood on a wide avenue lined with flowering jacaranda trees, a place people envied from the outside. Inside, it was full of polished surfaces and expensive furniture that I barely had time to enjoy. I spent years working to maintain that illusion of success. I hosted dinners where everyone smiled too brightly and talked too loudly about investments and promotions. We congratulated one another on surviving another week of exhaustion as if fatigue were a badge of honor. And yet, the deeper truth was this: I was terrified. Terrified that if I slowed down, the fragile identity I had built would collapse. Terrified that if I stopped striving, I would discover how little of my life actually belonged to me. So I kept running. I kept accumulating. I bought dresses I rarely wore and appliances I barely used. I measured my worth in square footage and bank statements, convinced that security could be purchased like a piece of fine china. Now, at 99, I live in a single quiet room. There is a narrow bed, a small wooden table, and a faded photograph of my husband smiling into a summer breeze that no longer exists. Everything else is gone, sold, given away, or discarded by well-meaning relatives who had no space for my memories. The grand house was demolished to make way for modern apartments. The objects I once believed defined me became anonymous items on a stranger's inventory list. You must understand this clearly. Material success has a very short shelf life in the museum of eternity. What feels monumental in the middle of your career will feel strangely insignificant when you are sitting alone with your past as your only companion. You cannot hug a promotion when your bones ache in the night. You cannot whisper your fears to a luxury car parked in a silent garage. I remember one evening in 1986 when I received an award for my work. There were chandeliers overhead and champagne flutes clinking like tiny bells of approval. People applauded my speech. They called me brilliant, unstoppable, extraordinary. I returned home flushed with triumph, expecting to feel transformed. Instead, I found my husband asleep in his armchair, the television flickering quietly across his tired face. I realized with a sudden hollow clarity that the applause had already faded. All that remained was the distance I had allowed to grow between us. It is a dangerous illusion to believe that achievement will eventually compensate for absence. The birthdays you miss do not wait patiently for your success. The small hands you fail to hold will grow into adult hands that no longer reach for you. Love is not a project you can revisit once your schedule clears. It is a living thing that requires your presence now, not later. You may be telling yourself a familiar story. I will slow down when I reach a certain number. I will travel when the children are older. I will forgive when the other person apologizes first. These sentences sound reasonable. They sound mature, but they are often just sophisticated forms of fear. Fear of vulnerability, fear of losing control, fear of discovering that life is not a rehearsal, but a one-time performance with no intermission. From where I sit, time does not look like a long open highway. It looks like a narrowing path disappearing into mist. Each year feels shorter than the one before it. Seasons collapse into one another like pages of a book read too quickly. You begin to notice how many last times have already happened without your awareness. The last time you carried your child on your shoulders, the last time you danced without pain, the last time you believed you were indestructible. This is why I'm speaking to you with such urgency. Not to frighten you into despair, but to wake you into clarity. There is a profound difference between existing and truly living. Existence is automatic. It requires very little courage. Living, however, demands that you risk embarrassment, disappointment, even heartbreak. It asks you to choose presence over perfection, connection over control. I am not telling you to abandon responsibility or drift through life chasing momentary pleasures. I am telling you to examine the cost of your constant postponement. Ask yourself with ruthless honesty what you are sacrificing in the name of a future that has not signed any binding agreement with you. Because one day, perhaps sooner than you expect, you will stand exactly where I am standing now, at the quiet edge where memories weigh more than plans. And in that stillness, you will not be comforted by the things you owned or the titles you earned. You will be comforted only by the moments you allowed yourself to feel fully alive. There comes a stage in life when your memories begin to arrange themselves not as a long, continuous story, but as a series of bright islands floating in a widening sea of silence. I spend many of my afternoons drifting among those islands. I revisit ordinary moments that once seemed too small to deserve attention. A shared cup of tea on a rainy morning, the warmth of my husband's hand resting absent-mindedly over mine during a dull church sermon, the sound of my daughter singing off-key in the back seat of a car that smelled faintly of oranges and dust. When you are young, you are taught to chase extraordinary experiences. You are told that happiness lives in dramatic achievements, in bold adventures, in milestones that can be photographed and applauded. But at 99, I can tell you with absolute certainty that the architecture of a meaningful life is built mostly from quiet details. The grand events are like fireworks, dazzling, brief, and quickly forgotten. It is the steady glow of everyday tenderness that illuminates the long night of old age. For many years, I misunderstood this completely. I believed that strength meant endurance, that love meant sacrifice, that success meant constant motion. I prided myself on being efficient, productive, admired. I was the woman who could juggle 10 responsibilities at once without appearing to drop a single one. People called me remarkable. Inside, I was often exhausted and strangely lonely, like an actress applauded for a role she no longer understood. It was not until my late 60s, after my husband suffered a minor stroke, that my perspective began to shift. I remember sitting beside his hospital bed, listening to the soft, mechanical rhythm of machines that seemed to be breathing on his behalf. For the first time in decades, my schedule was irrelevant. My deadlines dissolved. All that mattered was the fragile miracle of his continued presence. One evening, as the sun sank into a pale orange horizon beyond the hospital window, he opened his eyes and whispered something that has followed me ever since. He said, "Promise me you will notice the last times." I did not fully grasp his meaning then. I thought he was speaking about his own impending mortality, but over the years I realized he was offering me a philosophy, a way of seeing that transforms the texture of daily existence. The last time philosophy is deceptively simple. It asks you to live each ordinary moment with the awareness that one day it will never happen again. One day you will walk out of your childhood home for the final time. One day you will laugh with a friend whose voice will eventually fade into memory. One day you will climb a flight of stairs without pain for the very last time. You do not know when these endings will occur. Their invisibility is what makes them so easy to ignore. When you truly accept this, your relationship with life changes. You begin to taste your food more carefully, as if savoring a language you might soon forget. You hold your loved ones a few seconds longer than necessary, feeling the shape of their existence against your own. You become less interested in winning arguments and more interested in understanding the person standing across from you. Pride loosens its grip, gratitude takes its place. This philosophy also dismantles the tyranny of ego. For most of my life, I was painfully concerned with how others perceived me. I feared looking foolish. I feared making mistakes in public. I feared that a single misstep would diminish my worth. These fears kept me from singing when music stirred inside me, from traveling alone when curiosity called, from apologizing first when my heart knew reconciliation was more important than being right. Now, at the far end of my journey, I see how unnecessary that anxiety was. People are rarely thinking about you as much as you imagine. They are busy navigating their own insecurities, their own invisible battles. The harsh judgments you dread will vanish as surely as the people who make them. Their opinions are temporary weather patterns in the vast climate of your life. Once you release the need to appear invulnerable, you discover a surprising freedom. You may dance badly at a wedding and still feel magnificent. You may start a new career at an age others consider impractical. You may express affection without calculating the risk of rejection. In short, you may begin to live as if your days are precious, because they are. There is another truth I must share, one that is harder to articulate. As you grow older, time does not simply pass, it accelerates. Years begin to feel like months, months like weeks. Entire decades collapse into a handful of vivid recollections. This is not a poetic exaggeration. It is a psychological reality. The more experiences you accumulate, the less distinct each new one appears. Routine compresses perception. Familiarity dulls the edges of memory. This is why conscious presence becomes so vital. When you allow yourself to move through life on autopilot, scrolling endlessly through glowing screens, numbing discomfort with distractions, postponing meaningful conversations, you are not merely wasting time. You are shrinking your own existence. You are allowing days to blur into an indistinguishable haze that will offer little comfort when you are searching your past for warmth. I often watch young people sitting together in cafes, each absorbed in a separate digital universe. Their bodies share the same space, but their attention is elsewhere, fragmented into notifications and curated illusions. They are physically alive yet emotionally absent, like ghosts rehearsing for a future haunting. I want to shake them gently and say, "Look up. The person across from you is a once-in-a-lifetime event. So are you." Do not misunderstand me. Technology is not the enemy. Convenience is not a sin. But unconscious living is a quiet tragedy. It is possible to reach old age with a long resume and a very short list of memories that actually matter. I have met such people in waiting rooms and community halls, individuals who achieved everything they set out to achieve and still felt an unnameable emptiness, as if they had been following a map that led nowhere. The last time philosophy invites you to redraw that map. It encourages you to treat your health as a privilege rather than an entitlement. It reminds you that your body, strong and flexible today, will one day move more slowly, more cautiously. The energy you take for granted is a temporary gift. Spend it wisely. Spend it on experiences that enlarge your spirit, not merely on habits that anesthetize your restlessness. You may believe you have decades to figure all this out. Perhaps you do, but perhaps you do not. None of us receive an expiration date stamped neatly on our foreheads. We move forward under the comforting illusion of certainty, while the clock continues its impartial work. So I ask you again, gently but firmly, if this were the last year of your life, what would you do differently? Whom would you forgive? What dream would you finally honor? What fear would you stop negotiating with? These questions are not meant to darken your mood. They are meant to illuminate your priorities. Because in the end, the measure of a life is not its duration, but its depth. And depth is created by attention, by the willingness to be fully present for the fragile, fleeting miracle of being here at all. I am tired in ways that sleep can no longer repair. My body has become a quiet archive of aches, each one a small reminder that time has already collected most of what it came for. Some mornings I wake before dawn and sit beside the window, watching the first pale light struggle its way into the world. It is a fragile light, hesitant and tender, like the beginning of a story that knows it must also become an ending. In those moments, I feel both immense peace and a strange urgency, the peace of acceptance and the urgency of unfinished truth. If you remember nothing else from what I have told you, remember this. Life is not waiting somewhere in the distance. It is not hiding behind your next promotion, your next purchase, your next carefully constructed milestone. Life is happening now, in the quiet spaces you keep postponing, in the conversations you keep delaying, in the risks you keep rationalizing yourself out of. You think you are being responsible. Often you are simply being afraid. Fear is a clever storyteller. It dresses itself in sensible language. It tells you to wait until you are more secure, more prepared, more certain. But certainty is a luxury the universe has never offered anyone. I have lived long enough to see empires of confidence collapse overnight, to watch brilliant plans dissolve like ink in water. The only guarantee you possess is this present moment, this breath, this heartbeat, this fleeting opportunity to choose how you will exist inside your own life. There is a particular sadness that comes with extreme old age. It is not only the loss of strength or independence, it is the realization of how many chances were quietly abandoned along the way. I sometimes think of the version of myself who was 35, standing in a doorway with the whole horizon still open before her. I want to reach across time and whisper, "Stop rushing, stop proving, just feel this, just live this." But time is a one directional river. Advice cannot travel upstream, so I offer that whisper to you instead. Do not wait for permission to be joyful. Joy is not a reward for perfect behavior. It is a basic human necessity, as vital as water or sunlight. Laugh loudly, even if someone disapproves. Dance, even if your movements are awkward. Tell people you love them before circumstances force the confession out of you. Pride has ruined more relationships than betrayal ever could. Simplify your life before life simplifies it for you. The process is far kinder when it is voluntary. You do not need half the possessions you are currently sacrificing your freedom to maintain. You do not need the endless comparison that steals your gratitude and replaces it with quiet resentment. You need space, space in your schedule, space in your home, space in your heart, so that the essential things can breathe. Protect your health like a sacred trust, not because you are chasing immortality, but because vitality is the instrument through which you experience everything else. Walk in the open air. Let sunlight rest on your skin. Eat food that still remembers where it came from. Your future self will thank you in ways you cannot yet imagine. Most importantly, forgive. Forgive quickly, forgive imperfectly, forgive even when your ego protests. Carrying resentment is like dragging a heavy suitcase through an airport that never reaches its final gate. The weight exhausts you long before the journey ends. Release what you can. You will travel lighter. One day, perhaps many years from now, perhaps sooner, you will sit where I am sitting. The noise of ambition will fade. The urgency of competition will soften into something almost irrelevant. And in that stillness, you will review the landscape of your past. You will not ask how many awards you won or how impressive your resume appeared to strangers. You will ask whether you were present for your own existence. You will ask whether you allowed yourself to love and be loved without constant calculation. I cannot promise you a long life. Longevity is a mysterious negotiation between chance, genetics, and the quiet discipline of daily choices. But I can promise you this: a life lived consciously, courageously, and compassionately will feel longer in its richness than a century spent postponing your own awakening. The light outside my window is brighter now. Morning has fully arrived. Somewhere, a child is laughing. Somewhere, someone is falling in love for the first time. Somewhere, another person is making the same dangerous promise to begin living later. I hope you are not that person anymore. Go outside. Call someone who matters. Begin the project that frightens you. Taste your coffee as if it were a rare and temporary miracle. Listen to the ticking clock not as a threat, but as a reminder that you are still here, still capable of choosing depth over delay, presence over pretense. I have said what I needed to say. The rest of the story belongs to you. Now go and be alive while you still can.